Years ago, an old man found three helpless stray puppies. They were starving, trembling, and so weak they could barely cry. Most people passed them by. No one paid much attention. But he couldn't ignore their cries. He took them home, fed them, and gave them a chance at life when no one else cared. To him, it was just an act of kindness, but to those puppies, it meant everything. What he didn't know was that years later, those same dogs would repay his kindness in a way that left the entire town stunned. This beautiful story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. In a small wooden house at the edge of the neighborhood lived Mr. Harris, an old man whose days had long since fallen into routine. His beard was white, his hands calloused from years of labor. Yet his life now moved in silence. Every morning sat by the window and watched the world pass him by. Children hurried to school. Neighbors greeted each other, but few stopped to notice him. The laughter that once filled his home had faded years ago, leaving only the creak of the rocking chair and the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Though his body had grown slower, his heart still carried warmth. He longed for companionship, something to make the evenings less empty. Sometimes he would talk to the flowers in his garden or feed the birds that visited his yard as if trying to fill the silence. He never imagined that fate, in the form of three helpless creatures, was about to break that loneliness and rewrite his story in a way he could never have dreamed. One cold evening, as Mr. Stackson Harris walked home from the market, he heard a faint whimper drifting from the alleyway. At first he thought it was the wind pushing through broken fences. But then the sound came again, softer this time but filled with desperation. His steps slowed, his heart tugging at the noise. Curiosity and compassion pulled him closer. There, behind a pile of discarded crates, lay three tiny puppies. Their fur was matted. Their ribs showed beneath their fragile skin, and their eyes pleaded silently for help. They huddled together, trembling against the bitter air, trying to find warmth in each other. Mr. Stiles. Harris froze, his chest tightening at the pitiful sight. For a brief moment he hesitated. He was an old man with little means, already struggling with his own life. Could he really take on three helpless mouths to feed? Yet, as one puppy whimpered louder, his heart broke. He remembered his own years of loneliness and knew he couldn't turn away. He removed his coat and gently wrapped the shivering pups inside, holding them against his chest, their tiny bodies pressed into him, fragile but alive. "Don't worry," he whispered softly, his voice cracking. "You're safe now." And with that, he carried them home, unaware how deeply this choice would change his life. The first night was filled with restless cries. The puppies, still weak and frightened, whimpered in the basket where Mr. Harris had laid them. He sat beside them for hours, stroking their tiny heads, humming softly as though his voice could soothe their fears. Slowly, they settled, their breaths evening out as they drifted into fragile sleep. Over the next days, the house came alive. Mr. Harris prepared warm milk in small bottles, feeding each puppy carefully, patient with their clumsy attempts to drink. Their ribs no longer showed so sharply. Their eyes began to sparkle with life, and their tails wagged shyly whenever he entered the room. For the first time in years, laughter returned to the old man's home. The garden, once silent, now echoed with playful barks and tiny paws skittering across the grass. The puppies followed him everywhere, through the garden, around the house, even to the porch where he liked to sit in the evenings. Their loyalty was instant, their love unconditional. Mr. Harris felt his loneliness fading with each passing day. He wasn't just their rescuer anymore, he had become their family. And as he watched them grow stronger, he realized something unexpected. While he had saved their lives, they were saving his heart in return. Seasons turned, and the once fragile puppies blossomed into strong, loyal dogs. Their coats gleamed in the sun, their muscles hardened with play and patrol, and their once timid barks grew into deep, commanding voices that echoed through the yard. They were no longer helpless strays. They had become guardians. For Mr. Harris, life was no longer quiet or lonely. His mornings began with eager paws, scratching at his bedroom door, tails wagging wildly as if greeting him was the most important mission of their day. They followed him everywhere, into the garden, to the market, even sitting patiently while he drank his tea by the window. Yet, as the dogs grew stronger, Mr. Harris grew older. His steps slowed, His hands shook when holding their leashes, and the once brisk walks became gentle strolls. But the dogs adjusted to him, matching his pace, always attentive, always protective. When he sat on the porch in the evening, they lay at his feet like silent sentinels, their eyes scanning the world around them. Neighbors often remarked how remarkable it was, the way the dogs seemed to sense his every need. They brought him joy, security, and above all, love. Mr. Harris knew his decision that night in the alley had changed everything. He had given the puppies life, but now they had given him purpose. One quiet afternoon, Mr. Harris sat alone in his living room, the sunlight spilling softly through the curtains. His hands trembled as he reached for his cup of tea, but before he could lift it, his chest tightened sharply. Pain ripped through him. With a weak gasp, he clutched his chest and collapsed to the floor, his breath shallow, his eyes fluttering. The 3 dogs rushed to his side, barking frantically, nudging his motionless hands with their noses. They had lived with him for years, sensing his moods, his joys, and his pains. And now they understood something was terribly wrong. Without hesitation, they bolted out the door, their barks loud and desperate, echoing through the town like an alarm. People turned, startled by the commotion. The dogs weaved through the streets, barking at neighbors, circling back and darting forward again, pleading silently for someone to follow. Their urgency was undeniable. Finally, a group of townsfolk chased after them, confusion turning to fear as the dogs led them straight to the old man's house. When they entered, the sight froze them. Mr. Harris lying helpless on the floor, shock turned to action. An ambulance was called immediately. The dogs refused to leave his side. Their bodies pressed close as paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher. Even as the sirens wailed and the ambulance sped away, the loyal trio stayed near, unwilling to let their master face the darkness alone. At the hospital, the air was thick with tension. Doctors and nurses worked quickly, rushing Mr. Harris into the emergency ward. Outside, the 3 dogs sat anxiously, their noses pressed to the glass doors, whining softly as if begging to be let in. They refused to move, their eyes fixed on the hallway where their master had disappeared. Hours passed, each one heavier than the last. Neighbors who had followed stood nearby, whispering in awe about what they had witnessed. "Those dogs knew something was wrong," one man murmured. "They saved his life." Another shook her head in disbelief. "I've never seen loyalty like that before." Finally, the doors opened and a doctor emerged with a tired smile. "He's stable," he announced. Relief washed over everyone, but none more than the 3 dogs. Their tails wagged furiously, their bodies trembling with joy as if they understood every word. When Mr. Harris was wheeled out, pale but alive, the dogs leapt forward, surrounding him with gentle whines and licks. The crowd applauded softly, some with tears in their eyes. From that day, the story spread through the town. A tale of 3 strays who had once been saved by an old man, only to return the favor in the most extraordinary way. They were no longer just pets. They were heroes, guardians, and,